We're going to give people a couple more minutes. Room's kind of empty at the moment. I hear noise in the hall. I'm hopeful. Okay, yeah, we have her at the end is I think of what we did for her. No, we don't. I was gonna have a group. I tried to set up.
Oh, there are 3 Erics in your room.
All right, that's get started. Okay. Sorry, getting set up everybody online. Give me one sec, trying to get the minutes in the right place. Okay. All right, as people trickle in, we'll deal with that. People online, can someone write in the chat room if you guys can hear me? Perfect, thank you, Robin. Okay. All right, welcome to IETF 115. This is the DHCP working group. Here's the note well. Hopefully everyone's seen it. This goes through all of the IETF processes and policies. You signed this when you registered, but here it is again. Please read it over and follow all of the policies, including, code of conduct and IPR are the two we always want to talk about and make sure that people are following both of those. So if you're not sure, this group has always been good to me, so I expect that to continue. The note well went on. If you're not at the mic, please wear a mask. That's been going on all week. That's the policy of the community. That's the policy of this event. So thanks, everybody. I think people have been doing a good job this week. For blue sheets, Bernie still leaves that in there. Meet Echo does that for us. So please make sure if you're in the room that you're signed in to Meet Echo, that you're clicking on the right button. Note taking, I've started a doc. If people could help out with that, that would be great.
It's mandatory, by the way. We cannot start the meeting without a spot.
Okay. Okay.
So you can repeat what I said.
Eric would like a volunteer because we can't start the meeting until there is a scribe. In this case, I'm solo up here chairing, so I won't be able to do it. So if we could have somebody start the notes, or somebody online or even in the room would be great.
I can give a cookie for the notes.
Eric's offering cookies for anyone.
And a beer tonight.
Oh, a beer tonight. Look at you. Just the best AD.
You're only encouraging people to hold out.
Keep giving gifts.
So Eric, you just volunteer, right? Thank you, Eric.
Eric, if you just want to put it in a note too, you can just send it to me too.
There's no minutes link. There is. In the meetings. And the note, if you go to the meeting call, there is a button with a square.
Yeah, there's a.
Square and a pencil.
It takes you to Hedge Doc or something, but I'm also okay, Eric. I can track you down if you want to just use a doc and make it up and send it to me, and I'll drop it in there after. I'm just thankful somebody's writing down my musings.
No, he does. I can request
Please don't do that. It's going to be a real short meeting. Right. I'm going to assume, Eric, I'm going to go on and assume that you'll chicken scratch something down. Thank you. You're my hero. I'm Tim Winters. I'm chairing this group. Bernie, my co-chair, is in Cuba scuba diving, so he's having a rough time of it right now. So Bernie is not here. He misses everybody. Our agenda today, administrative stuff. We're going to talk about 8415 to internet standard for a little bit. And then we have a distribute SR locator by DHCP. We have registering self-generated IPv6 addresses. And then we have a couple of next steps. Anyone have any problem with that agenda or want to change it? Jen is in a different meeting, so I have her at the end, so I don't want to move that. But if people want to move anything else, I think we can do that. All right, moving on. Status. We don't actually have any working group documents at the moment. I think we're going to have soon a bunch after this meeting, but we currently don't have any, so there's not much for me to talk about there. There are 3 related documents right now, all of which are presenting today, so that's good. Everyone's made updates and they're all moving, so that's good. Just a quick thing we put on the slide is the milestones. We're aiming to have, oh, that's a typo. 3315 biz should be 8415 biz. Sorry. We're aiming to have that done in January of 2023. And then after we're done that, we can talk about rechartering or shutting down, whatever makes the most sense. All right, let me switch slides. So I'm going to talk, I guess the mic is still on. I'm going to talk a little bit about advancing DHCP v6 to an internet standard. So some of these are a retread, but just people aren't aware. We're trying to advance DHCP to an internet standard. It's the last main objective left in the DHC charter. So last meeting in Philadelphia, we decided to take this on. Just a quick reminder, here's all the requirements for everyone to read. You can go read these later, but these are all the things we have to do as part of the process of moving to an internet standard. Independent implementation status. So on that slide, there was a implementations that have to exist. Here we have lots of implementations exist of DHCP v6. I don't think there's a problem there. There's a little bit of trickiness here measuring 8415 compliance versus 3315 compliance, but ultimately there's a lot of DHCP out in the world and it's being used, so that's good. The proposed schedule for 8415 biz. So we just published 0.0 of this document. We started a working group last call that ends next week. Sorry, working group adoption call. Thank you. I misspoke. Yes, working group adoption call that ends on the 18th. We haven't seen much on that, so that's going to be one of my pleas today. Is everybody take a look at it, and I think this obviously makes sense as a DHCP working group draft. I think it's something we should work on. So I'd like to hear some noise on the mailing list about that. We're going to republish that document as a working group document. We actually got some feedback from Bad Links from IANA. Thanks for their review. They did some, so I think we'll probably stick those in the 001 that goes to the working group. So that's good news. We're hoping to put 01 out in mid-December with any changes as part of the working group working group adoption call. Jeez. Review, we want everything wrapped up by February 8th. We'll do as many updates in between there and March 16th is what we're aiming for. Yeah. Yes, 23. I have not built a time machine yet. Yes, it does. It's wrong. It's one of those days. Yep. So 20, I'll slash that through. Sorry. Yes, 2023, February. So we're aiming to have this all wrapped up by March IETF. I think if there's anything lingering, we can deal with that at the March IETF. It's kind of our game plan. One thing to note here is we're going to need a shepherd for this that is not one of the 2 co-chairs because both of the co-chairs are authors. So that's something we'll be looking for. If you're interested, please come talk to me about that. Thanks, Suresh. Suresh volunteers to shepherd that. That's awesome. Okay, so things in the 8415 biz that we've done since we last talked in Philly. We addressed all the erratas. We removed IATAs. We discussed removing them for 8415 when we did the update from 3315, and this time they're really gone. We took those out. We also took out the server unicast option because we don't find it, we didn't find many use cases for it. That also additionally resolved one of the erratas that was out for it. So that's been removed. And then we added a reference to 7943, or those are the four things we did. Any questions about any of that? So there was a couple of things we wanted to get some feedback on. One of them was the reduce the background material sections in 1.1 and 1.2. We talked about potentially bringing those down. There's a lot of extra stuff in there that I think can get removed now. I don't know if anyone has any opinions. I guess I'll go through these one at a time. If no one runs to the mic, I'm going to take these as we should probably do these. It's going to be my position on this. Or, yeah. So, does anyone have any strong opinions about leaving the background material in? No one's running to the mic. We should remove all text related to unicast transmission. So, we took out the server unicast options, but there's a lot of text about what to do in unicast situations. We could potentially remove them all. All of that text, we could leave it in there. It's a little odd that we took out that option, which almost, I'm going to ask the next question as well, is should we deprecate the use of the multicast status code? So the one thing that's here that I wanted to see if anyone had any opinions on was if it's an 8415 proper device, it might be using multicast, and a new server might not respond with use. So I don't know, we're not aware of any deployments, so I don't think it's a problem, but if somebody really wants, we can leave the use multicast status code and all the text to unicast in case there is what would become a legacy device that's out there trying to use unicast. Personally, I think Bernie was leaning towards removing all of that. I think that's okay. But I don't know if anybody really knows of any use of the unicast status code. Tomac confirmed that Kia doesn't support it at all. I know that there's other servers that do support it, but it's not used. So anyone have any opinions on any of that? Okay. I guess what I'm taking from this is we're going to go ahead and do all of these changes unless we hear something for 1.1. This is the play I was talking about earlier. Please send an email if you're in support of this becoming a working group document. Please send an email if you're not in support of this becoming a document. Please say something about this. I'll peck again probably after this meeting, but yeah, ultimately we want to adopt this and so we can move forward. Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're looking at it for the group to adopt it, please feel free to review or looking for reviews. I think that's my next slide. Yeah, my next slide. What you can do to help. Review the document when published and report any issues to the author's working group, anything. The faster we get these issues, the quicker we can get these things resolved. So if you find anything, you think anything's out of place, please let us know. I think we'll make all those changes in 01 that we talked about, that I just talked about. We'll see if anyone has any issues with that. And I think that's everything. So the main thing here is please do the adoption call and then review the document. Any other questions about 8415? All right. I'm going to move on. We have the SR locator. Oops. I don't know if somebody's online or in the room for this. Looks like online, guys. See, both of you are on there. I'm not sure who's presenting based on the request. So one of you guys want to jump on into the queue so I can admit you.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you just fine. Go ahead. Do
Yeah.
you want to run the slides or do you want me to share them? Sorry, I didn't even think about that.
So you will help me page up
Okay.
the.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Just tell me next and I'll switch to the next slide whenever you're ready.
Okay, I think let's begin from this page. So uh, the draft have been present in last IETF meeting, and according to the comments, we update the draft. Oh, I'm Wu Changcheng from China Mobile. So next page. Yeah, I will go through the slides quickly because most of them have been reviewed in last meeting. So the background for this draft is that the operators began to deploy SRv6 in mature network. The number of CPEs are very big, even more than 50,000 covered the whole city with high mobility. However, the normally the CPEs uh, don't deploy IGP, so operator need some way to dis- distribute the SRv6 locators dynamically to simplify the configuration. Next page. Uh, the basic idea is that the BIOS or the DHCP server treat the SRv6 locator as the IPv6 prefix. Then the DHCP server can allocate SRv6 locator as the prefix. Next page. Here is some basic format of the SRv6 seed. Uh, there may be two kinds of seeds. The original seed format defined in IFC 8986. The locator like IPv6 prefix. The locator of the comprised SRv6 seed uh, is separated to two parts, locator block and locator node. When DHCP server allocate the locator, the structure with both original seed and comprised seed should be covered. Next page. Uh, according to the comments last meeting, we introduced a new identifying association for the SRv6 locator. Uh, the structure uh, is shown in this figure. Next page. Uh, under the new IA, we define the IA SRv6 locator options field, which will be used to specify SRv6 locator. As the figure shown, the both original and comprised SRv6 seed structure are covered. Next page. The encapsulated format of the new IA are shown in the figure. And IA SRv6 locator option may appear only in an IA SRv6 locator option. More than one IA SRv6 locator option can appear in a single IA SRv6 locator option. So it's similar to the IPv6 prefix. Next page. So here we will provide two application scenarios. First is the BIOS works as a DHCP server. The behavior we choose here, it will allocate locator subnet prefix from the prefix pool and then generate the locator subnet router locally and distribute the local subnet router to other IPv6 node. So it's very simple. And next page. The second scenario is that the BIOS works as DHCP-v6 relay agent. So the behavior is also very simple. It relay DHCP v6 PD allocation messages, generate the locator subnet routine locally, and distribute the locator prefix routine to other IPv6 node. So it's very simple. Next. So here we choose what we have updated compared to the original, the revision in last meeting. So firstly, we defined a new IA option instead of using the option in the IA prefix option. The second point is that we define IA SRv6 locator option to specify SRv6 locator associated with an IA SRv6 locator. So it's just same with the comments received in last meeting. Next page. So we are seeking for the comments in DHCP working group as well in Spring working group. In fact, we hope to apply a slot in Spring working group also in this meeting, but we have not got it. We will try to contact the chairs of the Spring working group to see if we can look for some slot next time. So, any question or comments?
Yeah, one of them is a procedural question. Have you presented at Spring about this yet? What is the status of the spring working group with this document?
So no, we have not presented in spring, and we sent the request to the working group chairs before the meeting, but we did not get the slot. Maybe we need some further message exchange with the spring group and chairs.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think we definitely need to do some coordination. We don't want to make this option if the spring group has no interest in making this work. So I think we would need to see some interest from the spring working group before we would do anything more with this document. Another question I had about this one was I didn't see what to do if when they send out the solicit, if they get multiple answers back from different servers. I don't know if you want to write some text about that. I know in this case, it's probably not normal with BRASs, but it's definitely possible. So that might be something you want to consider adding to the document is what BRAS should do if it gets more than one of these IA SR6 locators and how it can choose or how it deals with that, whether it sends them all down or how that's dealt with. If more than one server answers it. I didn't see that anywhere in the document. I could have been wrong, but that might be something for you to consider as well.
Yeah, I think you are correct, and we should consider multiple locator or multiple other options. I think we can add some text, as you just mentioned, after the meeting and generate a new revision. And at the same time, I do think the spring working group is not interested in this draft. I think this draft is very useful for operators. We may try to send some email to spring working group to trigger some discussion on that. I think this is a very interesting topic for the spring guys.
Go ahead, Eric.
So Eric Ving, the responsible AD for DHC. I fully second Tim's point. We need to get interest in Spring to use this document before spending valuable time of this working group on this. So it's very important to get support from the Spring working group and from the chair of the Spring working group.
Sure, we will try to trigger some discussion there. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's everything I had. So yeah, get some, I guess our feedback is talk to Spring, see if you can get interest there, and then come back to the DHCP working group, and we'll continue to work with you on this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, Eric, Jen's up. Sorry for the late. 1 second, everybody online. Jen is in another meeting, and so we told her at the end, but we're running super fast today, so we're about 10 minutes before she was supposed to go. So hopefully she'll come in here. Second. No, you're perfect. We literally just, the slide just appeared.
We still work on cloning people, so I can be in 2 places at the same time. Hello. I think I know almost everyone, right? I'm Jen. Next slide, please. So we're talking about how to use DHCP v6 to record an addresses which were not assigned by DHCP v6. Quick recap to what Warren said last time in Philadelphia. So the usual scenario is, yeah, you have Slack or even statically assigned addresses, hosts are using it, but some administrators prefer to use DHCP-v6 as a kind of logging system, so they could easily find out who was using what. So it would be nice if they might want to have all information in one place, so they could look it up for troubleshooting, forensics, whatever. Like, I want to know, yeah, what particular device was sending that particular traffic. So there is a link to the slides, and obviously there is a video of really nice presentation by Warren. So next slide. So yeah, next slide. So what we've done in the last few months, we try to address feedback received on the list. I do hope we addressed most, if not all of it. So let's go through it. So we clarifying how the registration message supposed to be sent. First of all, we're saying that it must be sent from an address being registered. That would help on infrastructure which has some form of layer 2 security savvy to prevent spoofing. So you cannot register something you do not own. Well, in IPv6, especially in Slack, own means a lot of things, but at least you kind of responding to ND for that address. Which also implies that you cannot register multiple addresses in one message, so it's going to be a message per address. Secondly, host sends that message from the through the interface which has that address. So if you have multiple home hosts with multiple interfaces, we need to make sure we are sending it to the right place. And well, obviously, we're sending it for addresses which are not provided by DHCP-v6, which means Slack or statically configured. That's the changes. Next slide, please. Okay, that was about sending. Now, receiving some clarification on how to validate a registration message. I learned something. I didn't know there is already definition for address being appropriate for a link, which kind of means that DHCP server needs to know something about topology. So basically, the server should validate that the host is supposed to have that address. So if you're on VLAN X with Z/64, you should not be sending something completely ridiculous in the registration message. So what to do when the server receives this? The whole idea, basically, let's log it. Let's keep it somewhere so administrator could look it up later. So the server is supposed to log it somehow, and draft currently says should mark addresses unavailable and do not offer it. Actually, that's a question to the audience. Should we have should here or may? Because it kind of requires additional capabilities for DHCP server besides just logging. So it's a kind of going slightly more further, not just let's track addresses. Next slide, please. Retransmits. We now actually have, is it updated slides? But anyway, let's see. Retransmit. So proposed approach, which is currently in the draft. And I'll talk about another option which we are discussing as well. So just send n packets, by default 3, with some delay between them, preferably jittered, and let administrator to change those variables if they don't like it. So why we are not ACKing? Because there is no real point of having acknowledge, because initially you still can't rely on that, right? We deploy this on the client, and most likely the server would not support it in the wild. So you don't know if the server does not support it or it's just not ACKing it. Next slide, please. So for refresh, you registered it like three packets in 3 seconds, but obviously you need to kind of remind the server that you are still alive. So again, proposed solution is to send the message either when 1/3 of valid lifetime in initial PIO. So when you create an address, you go to PIO, look in the valid lifetime and send the timer. Or because by default valid lifetime is like a month, let's use 4 hours like a magic number. Warren thinks it's a magic number. Well, as good as anything else. And yeah, original PIO is lifetime is critical because you might get a subsequent arrays with different lifetime. So you might get into situation when you never send an update because it keeps changing, or vice versa, like getting them in the past. And refresh messages should be retransmitted using the same logic and messages in n seconds. Next slide, please. However, I like being at IETF. We had a lot of discussion in the lobby. So there is another proposal, which is not in the draft, but Bernie, I think, suggested it on the list.
Yeah.
So let's use standard DHCP retransmission logic with exponential backoff. And actually, if you backen it off up to 1 hour or 4 hours, whatever magic number we want to put here, it basically automatically takes care of refreshing. So you just start sending it fast, and then you slow down, and then you send it every hour or 4 hours or whatever. Then we don't need to separate refresh from initial retransmits. And we will also probably minimize the chances of packet being lost. So again, think about it. I don't know. I don't have strong opinions on which is better. It just, but remember, this option is not in the text yet. It just, okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is probably the main changes done since Philadelphia. So as I said, two questions here. It's about retransmit strategy, also about, yeah, shall we stop giving the registered address to anything else? And by the way, another idea came up. DHCP v4 has inform message. So maybe this should be called not registration, but inform. And besides that, the authors would like the working group to consider adoption if there are no strong objections. So that's it. Questions, comments?
Yep, we got some people in line. Go ahead, Eric, you're first.
Eric Levy, Cisco. Yeah, I have a couple of concerns with this. The first one really is on the principle. I feel like if you want the DHCP to know about your address, just ask for an address, and it will be a lot simpler than generating your address and then registering it. And you won't need to have, yet another mechanism. I see one exception to that. That would be link locals, but you never talk about link locals. I guess you don't want to register link locals.
It clearly states global address, right. Valid address.
So, so that was kind of my first concern. Should I follow with the next one, or?
Yeah, please.
So, after that, assuming you really want to go with that, at least try to make the protocol right. And in particular, you know that, well, everyone in this room is using Wi-Fi, everyone in the world is using Wi-Fi. Sending multicast over Wi-Fi is extremely harmful.
Upstream, Lorenzo, do you have comments on this? I guess upstream, it shouldn't be so bad.
Extremely.
Upstream? Upstream. You're sending from a client upstream. Well, you don't get multicast downstream, which probably.
It really depends where your relay or server is, right? So you assume that your relay or your server is never going to be
on Wi-Fi.
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 With DHCP guard, right? It better not be on Wi-Fi. It really had better not be on Wi-Fi.
I've never seen DHCP servers on Wi-Fi.
I can run a DHCP server on my laptop on Wi-Fi.
I know.
But I did reply to this on the list, though.
Yeah, I didn't see the reply.
Yeah.
So it looks, and in particular, the draft also states, well, that's the only message in DHCP that's not going to work with request reply or with,
doesn't require acknowledge currently.
It looks to me would be a lot more efficient if you just send your registration and get your acknowledgement, basically, or some sort of acknowledgement, which, by the way, could also tell you that the DHCP server has, somewhere it mentions that there could be an issue on the server with the link not being adequate. So there are
If
some error cases, right, where the DHCP server is not going to be able to register your address.
First of all, clarifying questions in this case. Again, we cannot rely on acknowledgement because it's quite possible that the DHCP server does not support that stuff, right? So what I'm supposed to do if I'm not getting an acknowledgement, and how it's different from not having acknowledgements at all, that not.
Well, if you don't get an acknowledgement, then you are back to eventually retransmitting a couple of times, which you are going to do anyway. And that's the end of the story. It's not worse. But if you get an acknowledgement, then you are saving quite a bit of messages.
Well, with exponential Bokov, probably not so many, but yeah, I guess, I don't know. I don't feel strongly about that. Yeah, so we definitely can consider that. I don't think it's a like critical here. Yeah, I agree.
And yeah, my last point was if the client is getting a temporary address, which is quite common these days, it would be nice to release the address when it's done with it, rather than relying on the fact that it doesn't refresh after a third of the life cycle of the lifetime. Sorry,
you say release, like the idea
DHCP
is
release.
You mean when you get rid of some DHCP?
Yeah, when the client's done with the address, essentially. Yeah.
No, I'm done with
Yep.
my
Yeah.
list.
All set. Okay. Ted, you're up.
So a couple things. One, I actually agree with the point about acknowledgement. I think there's no real downside to acknowledging. It just, you get the acknowledgement, you stop transmitting. If you don't, you don't. So it seems like a useful thing. And also it gives people an incentive to actually put a server there that's going to listen and acknowledge. I don't really care a whole lot about releasing, but it is a nice little cleanup. There was one thing, it was one of the early slides and I can't remember exactly what the point was. Could we go back one more? Yeah. So, I mean, one way to, one thing that occurs to me as a way to make this a little bit more, so actually I think it was the slide before this.
Sorry.
Yeah. So this thing about sending one message per IANA, I mean, we're probably going to have, like, especially if we're doing temporary addresses, we're going to have like a fair amount of churn here. It might actually be nice to say that we send a message that's like a DHCP inform style message, and we ask for some information about how to communicate with the server using TCP, and then do that instead of doing like all of these multicasts. I mean, it's true that we should probably not be sending multicasts to the Wi-Fi, but it's not clear that that's always going to be the case, particularly if you're in a home network or something like that. I don't know what the home network is going to do with a multicast. So it'd be kind of nice if there were a way to make the communication be unicast. And it doesn't seem like it's that hard a problem. And then like doing this suddenly just becomes a non-problem. It was this that kind of triggered me to think about that. I mean, I don't know how important this is, but it just sort of feels to me like it'd be better to do these with unicast if you could. And it seems like you could. I mean,
But just to clarify, unicast instead of multicast, but the idea of one packet per NA is like prevent spoofing.
yeah, exactly. So that's why I mentioned TCP, because if you use TCP, you get the three-way handshake. So you actually have a real thing there that's answering.
No. Okay, so you still would need to send one request per address, because otherwise I can establish a TCP session using address which I have.
Correct.
And register 25 different addresses which I actually don't.
Correct. Right. But it's pretty low key if you're using TCP to do these registrations, one per address. Whereas if you're using UDP and you're using multicast, then potentially, depending on the network, it could actually be problematic. So it just seems like it would be lower key. And I think we're talking about inventing something new here. And also, if you don't get back an answer saying yes, I can accept these things, then you're done, right? You basically only have to do this for one message. Like, your message is going to be, hi, I want to be able to do registration. Can I do that? And you only have to do that once. Like, or that is to say, you don't have to do that. You don't have to multiply it by the number of addresses you have. You're just going to do it for any given interface. You're going to only send one. So,
Interesting. I need to think about it. Yeah,
yeah.
thanks.
I mean,
Yeah, I'll-
I'm not sure how important it is. It just sort of felt like a thing that
yeah,
might
yeah,
be worth
thank
doing.
you.
Yeah. No, this would be greenfield. But you know,
Oh.
we're adding new capability anyway. So it's not like, I mean, there's a reason why DHCP does what it does with multicast, right? And the reason it uses relays the way it does. But this is kind of a different situation. If we can establish the link to the DHCP server, then that gets us our topology information. We know where the client is coming from. We could even send an identifier with that information.
Oh.
And then the TCP connections could all include the same identifier. So now the DHCP server knows where you're located.
Maybe it's, in this case, maybe just build a completely new service which like accept
Well,
registrations
there
over
is that.
TCP and like, yeah, it doesn't have to be DHCP, right? You just have a client.
Yeah. Well, no, the reason I suggested TCP is because you get the three-way handshake. So you, yeah. Yeah, but you can get that. You can get that on the Discover, right? You're trying to discover this service with DHCP, so you get the line ID there.
Yeah. Okay, Brian, you're
Oh,
up.
you're next one. Yeah, I just wanted to add a quick point. If we are going to do ACKs or some sort of acknowledgement from the server, it could also be useful to have like a Boolean just basically say like, yes, I am using this, I'm logging it. Please keep sending this when your address changes, or no, I'm not using this, so you don't need to do the every 4 hours resend or
But
send it again when you.
If you don't do this, you can just stay quiet.
But if you stay quiet, then you have to keep resending it because you don't know if it's been dropped or if they're not using it. So you could just, it can be optional, not required, obviously. So, but it could just an optional, hey, I acknowledge I received this, but I'm not going to use it.
Because I have nothing to do with implementing that stuff. I have a question. How much complexity we are ready, like willing to add for this? Well, because logging a message is just one thing with some minimal validation versus building all this state machine and other stuff. I have, again, fine with either option because I don't have to do this, but.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about the acknowledgement, but if that's being added, I think that could be an extra useful feature. So, thank you.
I guess someone taking minutes, right?
Yeah,
I just-
Eric's scribbling down things.
Ted Lemon, I just wanted to add something to this, which is that, so if you, now it's shot out of my head. Sorry. So we're talking about, yeah. I'll stand back. Huh? Oh. Right. So if the server, if you're sending the message to the server, and the server, oh, right. Yeah, this was the thing. So
There it is.
so one of the problems that we have with this current spec is that you could have a DHCP server on the link, but it doesn't support this message, and so it doesn't reply to it, right? On the other hand, if we do the Discover thing that I suggested, that could be done in a DHCP inform, and now you get an ACK back. You're always going to get an ACK back. It might not have the information you need, and if it doesn't, that means it's not supported. Info request, yeah, whatever. DHCP v4.
Details.
Yeah, details. So that would actually allow you to optimize out a lot of transmissions because you're gonna get back that information that says, yeah, this just isn't supported on the network, and you probably want to retry every so often just to make sure that it hasn't suddenly become supported. But that makes things a little cleaner.
Suresh, you're up.
Yeah, thanks. So there's two things. I think, like, Eric, you had a really good point, right? Like about the, the ability to kind of stop at some point, right? One thing, this is supposed to be a best effort mechanism, right? Like, the idea would be to kind of keep it simple and say, hey, I'm forming an address with Slack. I want to try to see if somebody wants to log this, right? Because in most cases, it's not going to be recorded, like, in home networks and stuff like that, it's not going to happen, right? So it's going to be a managed network that's going to use this, right? So that's one thing. But the second thing was like, okay, what is? I think, like,
Man,
just
there's
behind
something
that,
in
like,
the air.
yeah, it's only Tuesday.
Already too.
So what was the last thing you said, Eric? No, Eric Levy Avignoli.
Valid lifetime of temporary addresses, the release.
Exactly. Okay. So good point. Thank you. Thanks, Lorenzo. So I think the problem exists with or without this, right? So if you have temporary addresses, like it's going to fill up a neighbor cache at the router, right? Like, so if you have a way of clearing it, I think it's a really good idea, no matter whether or not like it's done here or not, it's something we can do. Because if somebody is saying, I'm going to give you X addresses per node, right? And like, it's never getting cleared, then I think this is a good way to clear it and saying like, I'm done with it, right? I think that could be a good thing to kind of follow up.
Actually, speaking of multicast, if I run this like Wireshark on my machine now, amount of neighbor discovery multicast packets sent by a host will probably be like much higher than what we see in this case anyway. So like I'm fine. I just thinking we're actually not adding too much of multicast here comparing to all other things you are seeing, right? Like if you have V6 only network and host doesn't know about that, amount of our multicast stuff it's sending is just ridiculous anyway.
Yeah, so for the, I think there's a very important distinction between the ND cache size and this. This is received by the server, committed to a log or not, and then doesn't need to be kept, whereas the ND cache does need to be kept. So I don't know that this is the right actually message type to like clear the ND cache, right? And the ND cache also does LRU, and it needs to forget about stuff, whereas the logging is, if you use this for forensics purposes, you have to keep it forever, right? Or at least until your log rotation period expires.
So I think the only question there, Lorenzo, would be is if you mark it unavailable, that would be keeping state in the server, right?
Yes, if you had, but like in theory, Dad will take care of that. Because we have this problem today with Slack and DHCPV6, where in theory, like the DHCPV6 server can hand out whatever it wants, and anyone can form Slack with whatever it wants. And
I totally agree. I guess my point is if you're going to do a should here, I think you'd have to clean it up because the servers.
Yeah, I guess we can say Maze because we put should and then we start talking about it and we're like, probably should is a bit too strong, so we can say may, but we can skip it completely.
Yeah, if you're having the DHCP server keep track of anything, you're going to want to clean it up.
So on the release, actually, that is what I like. One thing I wanted to say is like, we try to make this as simple as possible. Also to, and particularly also to ensure that like, it wasn't a barrier to implementation. On the release, I'm not like sure I understand how it would work because like the server needs to needs to obviously time stuff out when like, because like clients can just disappear, right? Yeah. And so if it doesn't do that, then it runs out of space, like basically. And the other thing is, so I'm not sure what a release would accomplish. Like you basically like save like maybe one message, but that's it really, because you do still have to refresh it while you're still there.
Yeah, from a forensics perspective, I would assume it would let you know when something left, right?
To be honest, practically, I don't know how often actually privacy extensions expires versus client dropping off the network, going home, coming back next day with different privacy. I just don't have data because like I would expect, I don't know, what's the privacy extensions lifetime, like at 24 hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, not so many clients actually staying for like some do, but
there's another obviously issue with sending the release is that if you have to send it from the source address that you're currently that you're using, so you have to do that before you release it. But I guess we could. I mean, it would also like require an additional message type. So I really
think about it.
I'm really not sure about the trade-off here. But it's not opposed to adding release. It's just I'm not sure it's that useful. Yeah.
So Eric Ving, without any head, not even the head of somebody who have reviewed the draft, right? So I didn't read it except the slides. So about the release, I think it's nice to have it mainly in the logs, because if you see this address coming up later, something fishy has happened. But anyway, my point is more that why are you proposing this only for the endpoints? You say you rely on the layer 2 and the Savvy switches. They also know the mapping between the IPv6 address appearing at some point of time. They don't get the DUID, of course, right? I don't know it. So send this information from Savvy switches would be useful as well.
You know what? I think we tried to say this in the draft. This is not a silver bullet, which is supposed to be a single source of information about all addresses used in the network. Especially if you start talking about forensics perspective, right? Ideally, what you have this, you have your neighbor cache entry from routers, you have your SAVI information, all together will give you a reasonably full picture about what's going on, right? So doing it from the switches, well, I guess you get this information from switches is much better way, like streaming telemetry and other stuff, right? Like the same way you should be getting your ND cache
It
collected.
will simplify, I guess, right? It will simplify the operation on the network because you get a single source of truth, as you say, the DHCP, if all the switches doing SAVI are implementing this. And the release then is clear, right?
I think you're not understanding each other.
Oh, maybe.
Lorenzo,
I
the
think
voice of
what Eric
reason.
might be saying is like just let's say in the draft that switches can send this on behalf of clients that don't implement this, right? I think that's why I say you don't think you understood, but and that's I think it's okay, except technically as worded that the address has to come, the message has to come from the source address, and so the switch would have to spoof it, but maybe it's okay.
Yeah,
Or maybe it would put it in a relay message, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Wait. Are we talking about DHCP clients on switches now? Again, Eric, are you going to be vendor people?
Yeah, something to think about. Okay, so 2 minutes left. Good job. The only thing I'm going to add, as this is a DHCP participant, I would definitely use the DHCP retransmit timer. Having tested boatloads of clients, they barely get that right. I think adding another one would be problematic at best, would be my advice. But you do what you want. But I'm sort of with Bernie on that.
We
and that
want to
clients-
hear smart people and suggestions. Yeah, that's why we're here. Yeah, so it's basically, that's why we put it on the slides, because we realize it might be a better idea. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think we can do, there's a lot of interest in this draft, so I think we should do an adoption call. We'll do it on list.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Okay, so here we are at the end. Couple of things just to remind everybody, please, working group adoption calls for, I think we're going to do one for that draft and we've already have one going for 8415. Please respond on list if you can. That would be great. There are some chats also I see now, sorry, Vicky, in the chat room about that draft too that Jen, you guys should go take a look at. Okay. All right, that's everything. Okay, I'll see you guys all in Japan in March, and thank you. Bye, everybody online. Yeah, I won't. Yeah, the chat's on. You can go to the chat anyway. It's on Zulu. Yeah. All right. Yeah.